Hello and welcome to the New Europe studios, where you can watch us make the news. Today I'm talking with Ambassador Nkosi, who represents South Africa to the European Union. We're going to be talking about the concept of Africa rising, the 20 years of EU-South Africa relations, which started with the fall of apartheid and the release of Nelson Mandela from prison. And we're going to have a look at where we're going to be going in the future together. So, Mr. Ambassador, one of the first things that people might not know about South Africa is the industrial strength that you have and the fact that you're possibly one of the most growing economies in Africa with quite a future. How is the South African economy doing?
Well, the South African economy, under the circumstances, we can say is doing fairly well. I say that because the South African economy is highly integrated into the global economy. And of course, as we are aware, we've experienced a serious economic slowdown in the global economy. We started with the subprime crisis in the US and developed into a financial crisis. And of course, in 2008, we had a serious crisis, largely driven by government debt and serious problems in the structure of the European economies, leading to the Eurozone crisis. So, as a result of that, the South African economy has been seriously impacted upon, and we've seen very low growth in the last 5 years, largely occasioned by external factors. But in spite of that, we're still proud to say that we have experienced reasonable growth, and we've been able to steer the course and ensure that we do not enter into a recession compared to other economies of a similar size or other economies in Europe and in the rest of the developed world, which have been seriously impacted upon by the global economic crisis.
I mean, and how has the economy changed over the 20 years since the end of apartheid? It used to be known as really just having a few precious resources, but you appear to have a more balanced economy now. How has that changed?
The structure of the South African economy has changed fundamentally from a mining resource-based economy to a very diverse economy. Services sector, manufacturing have been the main drivers of our economy, as well as agriculture. In fact, right now, mining contributes less than 10% to the GDP of South Africa. The biggest contributor to our GDP is the services sector. And I think this is in sync with the trends in major growing economies of the world, whether it's China, it's Brazil or India. The major drivers of growth in those economies have been largely the services as well as the manufacturing sector. So we're happy that we sit with an economy that is highly diversified, highly productive and highly competitive, an economy that is not just based on the extractive industries, but an economy whose export basket includes high value end products which are value added, which are exported to some of the most lucrative markets in the world, such as the EU.
And how have the relations between Europe and South Africa gone? Because the situation of South Africa 20 years ago was of a pariah state that nobody really wanted to do anything with. And it was only until a certain acceptability with the fall of apartheid that we really did begin to take notice and work with you. How has 20 years been so far?
Well, the 20 years of our relations with the EU have been a very remarkable period of collaboration, of cooperation, of solidarity and development. I must emphasize the EU as a single market is the largest trading partner of South Africa. We export into this economy quite a wide, a diverse range of products. The EU is the destination for 34% of our total exports, and of course it is the source of 48% of our imports. The EU is the largest contributor of foreign direct investment into the South African economy. Over 77% of FDI stocks that come into South Africa are sourced from the EU. But also the EU is a large contributor of ODA, Official Development Assistance, to South Africa. Over the last 20 years, we've benefited on average annually over $130 million from the EU going into South Africa. In fact, in the last multi-annual financial period, which ended in 2013, the EU had contributed over 980 million euros into South Africa as development assistance. This goes a long way in contributing to the provision of the public good in South Africa. It complements our own efforts, particularly in the areas of health, in the areas of education, and also the provision and rolling out of infrastructure for sanitation, for water and electrification. So we're very much grateful for the support that we've received from the EU, which has really helped us to integrate our economy into the global system. As you know, in 1999 we signed the Trade Development and Cooperation Agreement with the EU, which is not just a typical FTA, but it provides for development and cooperation over and above the trade access, the market access that it has provided for our goods into the EU. But of course it's a reciprocal arrangement, unlike the classical Cotonou agreement that the EU has with ACP countries. It's a reciprocal agreement that is compatible with the rules and regulations of the World Trade Organization. But in spite of that, we benefit quite a lot from this agreement with the EU. And of course, there has been a lot of achievements insofar as areas of education, where through the Erasmus project, South African students, postgraduate students for masters and doctoral studies have gained access to EU institutions. Over the last 20 years, over 1,000 students and academics have benefited from the exchange programs within the framework of Erasmus, but also the scholarship programs that are provided within that framework for postgraduate studies for masters and doctoral students.
I mean, South Africa does have a very good reputation for its education. There was a system in that was limited, and now it's been opened up in a more equitable manner. And I noticed that one of the things that people might be a little bit surprised at is the strength of ICT and modern technology in South Africa. You become very major players on the global level.
Indeed, South Africa has made very huge strides in bridging the digital divide and in entering into the age of information. We're proud to be a very active and a prominent participant and indeed a rider, if I may say so, in the information superhighway.
Yeah.
So we've made a lot of advances, and in fact, our financial services, the science and information technology community has largely been instrumental in placing us in this very prominent position of being a key player in the context of the ICT. As you know, we've just been appointed to host the biggest telescope in the world, which will enable scientists, students, tourists, and other people with a similar interest to view the Milky Way. This telescope will be based in one of the provinces in South Africa, in the Northern Cape, in Kimberley. That is the city that is historically known as the city where diamonds were discovered in South Africa. So this telescope is a major achievement for South Africa and for Africa, and it will place South Africa in the stratosphere of countries that are engaged in viewing the Milky Way.
I mean, I think you're being a little bit modest about this particular project. This is the SCAR system. It's going to be the world's largest radio astronomy. It's going to be the equivalent of this CERN reactor to Hadron Collider, to the state of man's knowledge on radio astronomy. And South Africa, if I'm right, has engineered it so it feeds into your education, whether it's from the degrees level courses right down to the local school children are all going to be involved in this. And I think this is something that does show something about a different approach that we get, that's perhaps a little bit more community minded and quite entrepreneurial as well. There's two different sides of Africa that I see. One is the entrepreneurial spirit, which is everywhere and is quite phenomenal, and also the picture of being yourself within a wider community, and asking yourself now as a diplomat who's also extremely qualified academically as a diplomat, is if we're going to see more diplomacy from South Africa with Europe, but also within the African continent and beyond, how do you notice anything different in the way that South Africa and your African fellow countries view diplomacy to what you see in Europe?
Well, diplomacy is a tradition-bound a profession, which is one of the oldest professions in the world, and its practice has been universalized. Of course, over the years, we've seen nuances and context-based practices. Whether it's the Asian way of doing things, or the African way, the Latin American way, but essentially the fundamental practice, the fundamental principles of diplomacy are the same across the world. So it's a highly universalized profession with set standards across the world. But of course, we have to respect local contexts and how people prefer to do things. which does not in any way detract or undermine the main values that are universal. So in the African context, for example, it's important to pay homage and to give respect and give due regard to certain African practices and customs in order for you to achieve your goals or to succeed in your diplomatic interventions. So you can't just apply or practice diplomacy in Africa or in Asia without giving due regard to certain practices and customs that are held dearly by those communities.
Because, I mean, South Africa has been playing a regional role, certainly, and in dealing with many of the sub-little conflicts in the area and helping bringing and brokering peace agreements. Do you see this as something that South Africa is likely to be doing more of, or at least offering its services? I can think of many conflicts and areas of problems between nations where South Africa could play the role of an honest broker.
Indeed, South Africa has been playing a very key role in helping to resolve conflicts on the continent. But we've adopted an approach of preventative diplomacy. We believe that it's important to prevent conflicts, and we have to have very good early warning systems, which give us a clear sense of likelihood of conflicts or tensions to emerge in particular countries. So we've invested quite a lot in our early warning capacity. And of course, the African Union is also doing the same thing. They are working on developing an early warning system, which will really help a great deal, because it's better to deal with conflicts before they arise while they're still simmering, rather than to deal with them when they've already blown up. So our approach is that we have to deploy preventative diplomacy, but of course, where the conflict has already arisen, conflict resolution is quite critical, and beyond that, conflict management becomes critical. We have participated in a number of peace efforts, peace missions on the continent. In the DRC, as you know, we've deployed as part of the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO. We've also deployed within the framework of SADC. We've got the intervention brigade that is currently based in the eastern part of the DRC, which has really helped a great deal in addressing the challenges of conflict in the eastern part of the DRC, particularly around the areas of Goma. We're also deployed in the Sudan within the framework of the UN and the AU in Darfur, and we're also participating in efforts to resolve the current conflict in Lesotho. As you know, our Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is the SADC appointed mediator for the conflict in Lesotho. So we stretched in various parts of the continent, and our approach is really to try and find a peaceful resolution to many of these conflicts on the African continent.
And I think it probably says something about the history of Europe and Africa as a continent, is that one of the biggest diplomatic challenges you've got is the fight over climate change.
Yeah.
And we're in one of these situations where the Africans are not responsible for creating climate change, but you're the first people to be feeling the effects of it. How, as we're coming also to the end of the first set of the Millennium Development Goals, we're also fighting and trying to reach agreements on climate change. How is that affecting South Africa? And what are you going to be looking out from the important UN meetings coming up on the subject?
Well, climate change is probably the most important, the most pressing challenge facing the world today. It's very important that we act responsibly to preserve the world for future generations. Otherwise, history will judge us harshly. We ought not to be selfish and simply take expedient approaches and routes that are only self-serving for the moment. We must think about the future. And this is the approach that my government takes when it comes to climate change issues. We believe that we have to have a legally binding agreement coming out of the negotiations in Paris next year. We have to have a fair, a balanced and equitable agreement that takes into consideration the responsibility of all the players within the framework of the Rio agreed principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which recognizes the responsibilities of both the countries, the developed countries of the north, as well as the developing countries of the south. And for us, it's quite critical that issues of mitigation and adaptation have got to be given a similar degree of importance. We should not emphasize one over the other. Developing countries have to be given the means to be able to make the necessary adaptations so that they can take very gradual, progressive steps of transitioning from fossil fuels and high carbon energy sources to low carbon energy sources. We have to be given the means to do that, and that's why we're calling for developed countries to make good on their pledges to the Global Climate Fund, and also to effect the necessary transfers of technology, skills and capabilities to enable developing countries to make the necessary adaptations. So it's a very important discussion, and we have to conclude this discussion with an agreement that takes us forward, a post Kyoto protocol that will be applied across the board from 2020 onwards.
And how do you see this developing so far? Are you hopeful that the Paris talks will come up with something?
Well, we were hopeful. Of course, in the next few weeks, we'll be going to Lima for the Conference of the Parties, the COP20 in Lima. Yeah. We think the Lima conference will be an important precursor to Paris. And we do hope that everybody goes to Lima with open minds, so that we can at least come to some agreement that reflects the interests and the views of all concerned, but most importantly, an agreement that addresses the current challenges that we're facing, because we're saying it's very important that we have to reduce the temperatures to below 2 degrees centigrade. Yeah. This for us is quite critical.
So that is the headline figure that you're looking for, is a 2%. 2% drop. Well, Ambassador, I hope you will come back and tell us how these talks went and how the continuing relationship between the European Union and South Africa continues to deepen and widen. And I think we all need to just remember is that South Africa has always been an ally to us. We've stood alongside those who have fought for equality there, and we've offering them solidarity, and it's a good news story what the last 20 years have brought to South Africa, even though all countries have tremendous problems. So I'd like to thank you for coming here, and let's hope that our relationship between the two continents and South Africa and Brussels continues to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.